My fiancé secretly texted my uncle to uninvite him from our wedding because he thought my uncle was too poor to afford the $150 per plate dinner, but my uncle was actually paying for the entire wedding and planning to surprise my fiancé with a luxury honeymoon gift. I need advice on whether I'm overreacting to something my fiancé did. This situation has been eating at me for weeks and I can't tell if I'm being too harsh or if my reaction is justified. My parents died in a car accident when I was 8 years old. My uncle Vincent, 52M, took me in immediately after the funeral. He had never been married and had no children of his own, but he stepped up without any hesitation. Vincent worked as a maintenance supervisor at a small manufacturing plant in rural Pennsylvania. The pay wasn't great, but he made it work. Those early years were tough. Vincent had to learn how to raise a little girl while working long hours. He would wake up at 5 a.m. to get ready for work, pack my lunch, walk me to school, then rush to his job. After work, he would pick me up from the after-school program, help with homework, make dinner, and handle all the household tasks. Weekends were for grocery shopping, laundry, and any activities I wanted to do. Vincent never complained about the sudden change in his life. He sold his motorcycle because it wasn't safe for transporting a child. He gave up his weekend fishing trips with friends. He moved us to a slightly larger apartment so I could have my own room. When I got interested in piano lessons at age 10, he worked overtime for 3 months to afford a used keyboard and weekly lessons with Mrs. Archer down the street. The apartment we lived in wasn't fancy. The carpet was old and the kitchen appliances were mismatched, but Vincent kept everything clean and functional. He painted my room pink because I asked him to, even though he had never painted anything before in his life. The walls weren't perfectly smooth, but I loved that room. Vincent attended every school event, parent-teacher conference, and school play. He was usually the only single parent in the room, often still wearing his work clothes because he came straight from the plant. Other parents sometimes gave him curious looks, but he never seemed bothered by it. He would sit in the front row at my school concerts and clap louder than anyone else. When I started high school, Vincent began working double shifts on weekends to save money for my college fund. He never told me this directly, but I figured it out when I noticed he was gone more often on Saturdays and Sundays. I asked him about it once and he just said he was helping out a coworker who needed extra coverage. During my senior year, several of my classmates were stressing about college costs and student loans. When I brought this up to Vincent, he sat me down at our small kitchen table and opened a shoebox he kept on top of the refrigerator. Inside were dozens of bank deposit slips and a savings account booklet. He had saved $30,000 over the years. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it would pay for most of my first 2 years at the state university. I cried that night, not just because of the money, but because I realized how many sacrifices he had made. No new clothes for himself, no vacations, no entertainment expenses. Everything went toward our basic needs and my college fund. College was a 3-hour drive from home, but Vincent drove down every few weeks to take me to dinner and make sure I was doing okay. He would arrive on Friday evenings in his old pickup truck, usually bringing homemade cookies or some item he thought I might need for my dorm room. We would go to the same diner near campus and he would ask about my classes, my friends, and whether I needed anything. After graduation, I got a job in marketing at a mid-sized company in Philadelphia. The salary was decent and I found a small 1-bedroom apartment in the city. Vincent helped me move in, assembling furniture and making sure everything worked properly. He seemed proud but also a little lost. For the first time in 12 years, he was living alone again. I called him every Sunday evening and visited once a month. His life had settled into a quiet routine. Work, home, occasional fishing trips that he had resumed. He started volunteering at the local food bank on weekends, something he mentioned casually during one of our phone calls. About 3 years ago, I met Nicholas, 31M, at a company holiday party. He worked in the finance department of a consulting firm and lived in a nice apartment in Center City. Nicholas was confident, well-dressed, and seemed to have his life figured out. He asked me out the following week and we started dating regularly. Nicholas grew up in the suburbs outside Philadelphia. His parents were both professionals. His father was an accountant and his mother worked in real estate. They lived in a large house with a 2-car garage and took family vacations every year. Nicholas went to private school and his parents paid for his college education without him needing loans or part-time jobs. When I first told Nicholas about my background, I kept it simple. I mentioned that my uncle raised me after my parents died and that we were close. I didn't go into details about our financial situation or Vincent's job. Nicholas seemed sympathetic but didn't ask many questions. The first time Nicholas met Vincent was about 8 months into our relationship. I had invited Nicholas to drive up for a weekend visit. Vincent had cleaned the apartment thoroughly and bought steaks to grill on the small balcony. He wore his best shirt and had gotten a haircut for the occasion. Nicholas was polite during the visit but seemed uncomfortable. He made small talk about sports and the weather, but I could tell he was judging the surroundings. The apartment furniture was old but well maintained. The television was an older model and the kitchen was tiny compared to what Nicholas was used to. Vincent showed Nicholas some photo albums from my childhood and told stories about my school activities, but Nicholas's responses were polite rather than engaged. After we left on Sunday, Nicholas made a few comments during the drive back to Philadelphia. He mentioned that the area seemed economically depressed and that it must have been hard for me growing up there. He also said something about Vincent seeming like a nice guy but probably struggling financially. I didn't correct his assumptions. Over the next 2 years, Nicholas met Vincent 3 more times. Once when Vincent drove down to Philadelphia to take us to dinner for my birthday. Once when we stopped by his apartment during a weekend trip to visit some of Nicholas's college friends who lived nearby. And once when Vincent came down to help me move to a larger apartment. Each time, Nicholas was cordial but distant. He would check his phone frequently during conversations and seemed eager to end the visits. After the dinner for my birthday, Nicholas commented that the restaurant Vincent chose was pretty basic and that Vincent probably couldn't afford anywhere nicer. Again, I didn't correct him. Last year, Nicholas proposed during a weekend trip to New York City. He had planned everything carefully, a nice restaurant, a ring he had been shopping for secretly, and a photographer who captured the moment from across the restaurant. I said yes immediately. We set the wedding date for October and started planning. The wedding planning process revealed some differences in our backgrounds. Nicholas's parents immediately offered to contribute $20,000 toward the wedding expenses. They had specific ideas about venues, catering, and guest lists. Nicholas seemed to assume that my contribution would be much smaller, given what he perceived about Vincent's financial situation. During one of our planning meetings with the wedding coordinator, Nicholas made a comment about keeping costs reasonable since we were paying for most of it ourselves. He suggested limiting the guest list and choosing a less expensive venue. When I asked why, he glanced at me meaningfully and said he didn't want to put any financial pressure on my family. I had been wrestling with whether to tell Nicholas the truth about our family's financial situation. Vincent had come into some money about 5 years ago through a series of events that even I didn't fully understand at the time. His grandfather had owned land that was sold to a development company. There were also some investments that had done well and an insurance settlement from an accident at the plant where he worked. Vincent was actually quite comfortable financially now, though he continued living modestly and working at the same job. Vincent had offered several times to help with wedding expenses, but I had been hesitant to accept. I wanted Nicholas and I to pay for our own wedding as a matter of independence and principle. However, as the costs kept rising and Nicholas kept making comments about money, I reconsidered. 3 weeks ago, I had a long conversation with Vincent about the wedding expenses. He offered to pay for the entire wedding as his gift to us. He had been setting money aside specifically for this purpose and insisted that it would make him happy to contribute. After thinking about it for several days, I agreed to accept his generous offer. I decided to surprise Nicholas with this news. My plan was to tell him after we had finished booking all the vendors, so he could see that money wasn't going to be a constraint after all. I thought he would be relieved and excited about the possibilities. Last Tuesday, I was at work when Vincent called me. He sounded different, his voice was flat and he asked if I could come see him that evening instead of our usual Sunday call. I told him I would drive up after work. When I arrived at his apartment, Vincent was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in front of him. He looked up when I came in and handed me the phone without saying anything. There was a text message thread open between him and Nicholas. The first message was from Nicholas, sent the previous evening. It read, "Hi Vincent, this is Nicholas. I got your number from Sarah's phone. I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. I know money is probably tight for you right now and I don't want you to feel pressured to spend beyond your means. The wedding costs are getting pretty high and I think it would be better if we kept things simple. Maybe you could just come to the ceremony itself and skip the reception? That would save on the dinner cost and you wouldn't have to worry about getting a hotel room for the night. Let me know what you think." Vincent had responded, "I'm not sure what you mean. I can afford to attend my niece's wedding." Nicholas's reply came an hour later, "I understand you want to be there, but I'm trying to look out for everyone here. The reception dinner is $150 per person and I know that's probably a lot for you. Plus the hotel rooms in the area are expensive that weekend. I don't want you to go into debt over a party. Maybe we can have a small dinner with just you and Sarah sometime after the honeymoon?" Vincent had not responded to that message. I stared at the phone screen for several minutes. Nicholas had taken my phone while I was sleeping to get Vincent's number. He had made assumptions about Vincent's financial situation and decided unilaterally to disinvite him from our wedding reception. He had done this without consulting me and had presented it as if he was doing Vincent a favor. Vincent finally spoke up. He said Nicholas seemed like he meant well but that the whole situation felt strange to him. He asked if I had told Nicholas that he couldn't afford to attend the wedding. I told Vincent the truth about Nicholas's assumptions and about my own hesitation to correct them. I also told him about his offer to pay for the wedding and how I had planned to surprise Nicholas with that news. Vincent listened without interrupting. After I finished explaining, Vincent was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said that he was disappointed in Nicholas's approach but that he was more concerned about how this reflected on our relationship. He asked if I thought Nicholas would treat me differently if he knew the truth about our family's financial situation. I stayed at Vincent's apartment that night, sleeping on the couch like I used to do during high school when I was stressed about something. The next morning, Vincent made pancakes and coffee, and we talked more about the situation. He said he would support whatever decision I made about the wedding but that he thought I deserved someone who respected both me and my family. I drove back to Philadelphia that afternoon and confronted Nicholas as soon as he got home from work. I showed him the text messages and asked him to explain why he had contacted Vincent without telling me. Nicholas's initial reaction was defensive. He said he was trying to be considerate of Vincent's situation and that he thought it would be awkward to discuss money issues in front of me. He insisted that he was looking out for everyone's best interests and that I was being overly sensitive about it. When I told him that Vincent could easily afford to attend the wedding and had actually offered to pay for the entire event, Nicholas's expression changed completely. He stared at me for several seconds, then asked why I had never mentioned this before. I explained my reasoning about wanting to be independent and my plan to surprise him with the news about Vincent's contribution. Nicholas listened, but instead of apologizing for his assumptions or his secretive behavior, he became angry. He said that if I had been honest from the beginning, none of this would have happened. He accused me of playing games and creating unnecessary drama. He said that my secrecy had caused him to worry about money for months and that I was responsible for the awkward situation with Vincent. The argument continued for over an hour. Nicholas insisted that his text messages to Vincent were reasonable given the information he had. He refused to acknowledge that going behind my back was inappropriate. He also refused to apologize to Vincent, saying that his intentions were good even if his assumptions were wrong. The conversation ended with Nicholas saying he needed some time to think about everything. He went to our bedroom and closed the door. I slept on the couch that night. For the past week, Nicholas has been giving me the silent treatment. He leaves for work early and comes home late. He sleeps in the bedroom while I stay on the couch. He responds to direct questions about practical matters but otherwise doesn't speak to me. This silent treatment is familiar. Nicholas has done this before during other arguments, though never for this long. Usually, the pattern is that he withdraws completely until I apologize and try to make things right. But this time feels different. I keep thinking about Vincent sitting at his kitchen table with those text messages. The man who raised me, worked double shifts to save for my college, and offered to pay for my entire wedding was being told he couldn't afford to attend my reception. The person who stepped up when I had nobody else was being dismissed as a financial burden. I also keep thinking about Nicholas taking my phone while I was sleeping to get Vincent's number. The secretive planning, the assumption that he could make decisions about my family without consulting me, and his refusal to take responsibility for any of it. Our wedding is supposed to be in 6 weeks. The invitations went out a month ago. The vendors are booked and deposits have been paid. Nicholas's family and friends have made travel arrangements. But I can't stop thinking about whether I want to marry someone who would treat my uncle this way. Am I overreacting to this situation? Should I be more understanding of Nicholas's perspective? Or are these actions revealing something important about his character that I need to consider before we get married? Update 1. I wanted to update everyone on what happened after my original post. Thank you to everyone who responded. Reading the comments helped me see some things more clearly. The silent treatment continued for another week after I posted. Nicholas would leave for work before I woke up and come home after I had gone to bed. He moved his clothes and personal items from our shared bedroom into the spare room. When I tried to initiate conversations about the wedding or our relationship, he would say he wasn't ready to talk yet. During this time, I called Vincent several times. He had received no further messages from Nicholas and hadn't heard from him at all. Vincent asked how I was holding up, but I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to influence my decision about the wedding, but I could sense his concern. I also started paying attention to patterns in my relationship with Nicholas that I had previously overlooked. The silent treatment wasn't new. He had used it after arguments about my job, my friends, and decisions about how we spent our free time. Looking back, I realized that most of our disagreements ended with me apologizing first, even when I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. There was the time 8 months ago when I had made plans to have dinner with college friends on a Friday night. Nicholas had mentioned earlier in the week that he might want to go out that night, but we hadn't made definite plans. When Friday came and I confirmed my dinner plans, Nicholas became upset that I hadn't checked with him first. He didn't speak to me for 3 days. I eventually apologized for not coordinating better, even though I felt like I had done nothing wrong. Another incident happened around Christmas last year. Nicholas's family had invited us to their annual holiday party, but I had already committed to helping Vincent volunteer at the food bank's Christmas dinner for people who had nowhere else to go. When I explained the conflict to Nicholas, he said I could skip the volunteer work since we only saw his family a few times a year. When I said the volunteer commitment was important to me, Nicholas became cold and distant. He attended his family's party alone and didn't speak to me properly for a week afterward. I ended up apologizing for not prioritizing his family's event. There were smaller incidents too. Times when Nicholas would become quiet and withdrawn if I disagreed with his restaurant choices, his TV show preferences, or his opinions about current events. The pattern was always the same: conflict, silence, and then me making the first move toward reconciliation. As I thought about these patterns, I realized that I had been accommodating Nicholas's need to be right and to have the final word in most situations. I had convinced myself that this was normal relationship compromise, but it was starting to feel more like I was walking on eggshells. 10 days after my original post, Nicholas finally broke his silence. I was in the kitchen making coffee before work when he appeared in the doorway. He said we needed to talk about the wedding timeline since vendors would need final confirmation soon. We sat down at the kitchen table and Nicholas spoke first. He said he had been thinking about everything that happened and that he understood why I was upset. However, he maintained that his actions were reasonable given the information he had at the time. He said that if I had been transparent about Vincent's financial situation from the beginning, the whole misunderstanding could have been avoided. Nicholas also said he felt hurt that I had kept such a significant secret from him. He pointed out that we were supposed to be partners and that partners don't hide important information from each other. He said my secrecy had damaged his trust in me and that he needed assurance it wouldn't happen again. When I asked about an apology to Vincent, Nicholas said he would be willing to send a message clarifying the misunderstanding. But he insisted that Vincent should understand that the original text messages were sent with good intentions and that no real harm had been done. I asked Nicholas how he would feel if Vincent had sent me private messages about Nicholas without consulting him first. Nicholas said the situations weren't comparable because he had been trying to solve a problem, not create one. The conversation continued for about an hour. Nicholas's position remained consistent. He acknowledged that the situation was unfortunate, but he placed the primary responsibility on my lack of transparency. He was willing to move forward with the wedding as long as we established better communication going forward. I told Nicholas the first needed more time to think about everything. He seemed frustrated by this response and asked what there was to think about. He said we had already lost too much time to this argument and that we needed to focus on finalizing wedding preparations. That afternoon, I called in sick to work and drove up to see Vincent. I told him about my conversation with Nicholas and asked for his honest opinion about the situation. Vincent was quiet for a long time before responding. He said that Nicholas's approach concerned him, not just because of the text messages, but because of the assumptions behind them. Vincent pointed out that Nicholas had made decisions about our family without consulting me and had shown no curiosity about our actual circumstances. Vincent also said something that stuck with me. He said that in a strong relationship, both people should feel comfortable being themselves without fear of judgment or retaliation. He asked if I felt like I could disagree with Nicholas without consequences. That question made me realize something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I had been editing myself around Nicholas in small ways for months. I was careful about which stories I told about my childhood. I downplayed my close relationship with Vincent because Nicholas seemed to find it excessive. I had learned to present my opinions tentatively so that Nicholas wouldn't feel challenged. I spent the night at Vincent's apartment again. The next morning, he made his usual breakfast and we talked more about the situation. Vincent said he would support whatever decision I made, but he wanted me to be honest with myself about whether I was happy in the relationship. During the drive back to Philadelphia, I thought about the question Vincent had asked. Did I feel comfortable being myself with Nicholas? The honest answer was no. I felt like I was constantly managing Nicholas's reactions and trying to avoid conflicts that would result in days of silent treatment. When I got home, Nicholas was waiting for me. He asked where I had been and seemed annoyed when I told him I had visited Vincent. He said it wasn't appropriate for me to discuss our relationship problems with Vincent and that some things should stay between us. I asked Nicholas why he felt that way, given that Vincent was the closest thing to a parent I had. Nicholas said that was exactly the problem. I was too dependent on Vincent's approval and needed to prioritize our relationship instead. This comment triggered something in me. I realized that Nicholas was essentially asking me to choose between him and Vincent. Not explicitly, but through subtle pressure and criticism of our relationship. Nicholas had never directly forbidden me from spending time with Vincent, but he had made it clear that he found our closeness inappropriate and excessive. I told Nicholas that Vincent was my family and that any future husband would need to accept and respect that relationship. Nicholas said he understood that, but that there had to be boundaries. He said that running to Vincent every time we had a problem wasn't healthy for our relationship. The argument that followed was different from our previous fights. This time, I didn't try to manage Nicholas's reactions or find ways to compromise. I told him directly that his behavior toward Vincent was unacceptable and that his refusal to take responsibility for his actions was a problem. Nicholas responded with his usual tactic of turning the argument back on me. He said I was being dramatic and that I was looking for reasons to sabotage our relationship. He accused me of caring more about Vincent's approval than about our future together. But this time, the silent treatment that followed didn't have the same effect on me. Instead of feeling anxious and guilty, I felt relieved. The apartment was quieter, but it was also more peaceful. I wasn't walking on eggshells or trying to anticipate Nicholas's moods. I spent the next few days thinking about what I wanted from a marriage. I thought about Vincent's relationship with my Aunt Linda, who had passed away when I was in college. They had been together for only 2 years, but I remembered how they treated each other. There was no silent treatment, no power struggles, no need to manage each other's reactions. They disagreed sometimes, but they worked through conflicts directly and respectfully. I also thought about the kind of partner I wanted to be. I realized that I had been so focused on avoiding conflict with Nicholas that I had stopped being authentic. I had been presenting a version of myself that I thought would be easier for him to accept. Yesterday morning, I made my decision. I waited for Nicholas to come home from work and told him that I wanted to call off the wedding. Nicholas's initial reaction was shock, then anger. He accused me of throwing away our relationship over a misunderstanding. He said I was letting Vincent manipulate me into making a decision I would regret. When I explained that this wasn't about Vincent, but about fundamental differences in how we handled conflict and respect, Nicholas became more agitated. He said I was overanalyzing everything and that all couples went through rough patches before their weddings. Nicholas then offered to compromise. He said he would apologize to Vincent and that we could work on our communication issues after the wedding. He pointed out that we had already spent thousands of dollars on deposits and that our families and friends had made plans to attend. I told Nicholas that I appreciated his willingness to work on things, but that I needed to be honest about my doubts. I said I didn't think we were compatible in some fundamental ways and that getting married wouldn't solve those problems. The conversation lasted several hours and went in circles. Nicholas alternated between anger, bargaining, and attempts to convince me that I was making a mistake. He said I would regret this decision and that I was throwing away a good relationship because of unrealistic expectations. Finally, Nicholas asked what it would take to change my mind. I told him honestly that I didn't think anything would change my mind at this point. The issues we had weren't just about this one incident, but about patterns in our relationship that I had been ignoring for too long. Nicholas said he needed time to process everything and left to stay at his friend's apartment. He took a suitcase and some of his belongings. Before he left, he asked me to promise not to make any official announcements about the wedding until we had a chance to talk again in a few days. I agreed to wait before making any public announcements, but I also told him that my decision was final. Nicholas said he didn't believe that and that he thought I would come to my senses once I had time to think rationally about what I was giving up. This morning, I called Vincent to tell him about my decision. He listened without interrupting and then said he was proud of me for being honest about what I wanted. He offered to help with any practical aspects of canceling the wedding, but he didn't express relief or satisfaction about the decision. He just said he supported me and would be there for whatever I needed. I'm supposed to call Nicholas tonight to talk more about the practical aspects of calling off the wedding. I'm not looking forward to that conversation, but I feel certain about my decision. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe properly. Update 2: A lot has happened since my last update and I wanted to share the latest developments. Some of you had asked about the practical aspects of calling off a wedding, so I'll include details about that process as well. The conversation with Nicholas that I mentioned at the end of my last update didn't go as planned. When I called him at his friend's apartment, Nicholas said he had been thinking about everything and that he believed we could work through our problems if I was willing to compromise. His specific proposal was that we postpone the wedding by 6 months instead of canceling it entirely. Nicholas said this would give us time to attend couples counseling and work on our communication issues. He also offered to have a proper conversation with Vincent to clear the air. I told Nicholas that I appreciated his willingness to work on things, but that postponing wouldn't change my fundamental concerns about our relationship. Nicholas became frustrated and said I wasn't giving us a real chance to fix things. He accused me of making a permanent decision based on temporary problems. The call ended with Nicholas saying he wasn't ready to accept that our relationship was over. He asked for 1 more week to put together a plan for how we could move forward. Against my better judgment, I agreed to wait 1 more week before making any official announcements about the wedding. During that week, Nicholas reached out to me several times with different proposals. He suggested we could go to premarital counseling. He offered to move to a larger apartment where Vincent would be more comfortable visiting. He even said we could have a smaller, less expensive wedding if money was part of the issue. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Nicholas would present a solution that he thought addressed the surface problems, and I would try to explain that the issues were deeper than logistics or communication skills. Nicholas seemed unable to understand that the problem wasn't just about the incident with Vincent, but about fundamental differences in how we approached conflict and relationships. Meanwhile, I had started the process of canceling wedding vendors. This turned out to be more complicated and expensive than I had anticipated. The venue required 30 days notice to avoid paying the full amount, but we were only 5 weeks out from the wedding date. The caterer had already ordered food and would charge us for 50% of the total cost. The photographer was willing to refund the deposit minus a $500 cancellation fee. I called Nicholas to discuss how we would split these costs. Nicholas's response was that if I was the one choosing to cancel the wedding, I should be responsible for all the cancellation fees. He said he was still willing to get married and that the financial losses were a result of my decision. I pointed out that both of us had signed contracts with the vendors and that both of us should share the financial responsibility. Nicholas disagreed and said he wouldn't pay for cancellation fees unless I could prove that he had done something wrong that justified calling off the wedding. This conversation revealed something about Nicholas's character that I hadn't fully recognized before. He was willing to let me absorb all the financial consequences of a decision that was based on problems in our relationship that he had contributed to. His attitude was that since he still wanted to get married, he bore no responsibility for the costs of canceling. I told Nicholas the first would pay the cancellation fees myself rather than continue arguing about it. This seemed to surprise him. I think he expected that the financial pressure would convince me to reconsider calling off the wedding. After I hung up from that call, I realized that Nicholas's approach to the cancellation fees was consistent with his approach to the original incident with Vincent. In both cases, he took actions that created problems and then refused to accept responsibility for the consequences. I spent that weekend calling vendors and family members to officially cancel the wedding. Most of the vendors were professional and understanding. A few seemed annoyed, but they processed the cancellations according to their contract terms. Calling family members was more difficult. Nicholas's parents were shocked and asked if there was anything they could do to help us work things out. They offered to pay for counseling and suggested that cold feet before a wedding was normal. I appreciated their concern, but I kept my explanation simple. I told them that Nicholas and I had realized we weren't compatible and that it was better to figure this out before the wedding rather than after. Vincent took the news calmly. He said he had suspected this might happen based on our conversations over the past few weeks. He offered to drive down and help me deal with any practical aspects of the cancellation that I needed help with. The most awkward part was calling friends who had made travel arrangements for the wedding. Most people were supportive once I explained that the decision was mutual and amicable. A few friends seemed disappointed that they had already booked hotels and flights, but no one made me feel guilty about it. By the end of that weekend, all the official cancellations were complete. I had spent about $3,200 in cancellation fees, but most of the deposits were refunded. The financial loss was significant but manageable. On Monday evening, Nicholas called to ask if I had gone through with canceling everything. When I confirmed that I had, he became angry. He said I had made irreversible decisions without giving him a real chance to fix our relationship problems. Nicholas also said he had been talking to his friends about our situation and that they all thought I was making a mistake. He said that most couples go through difficult periods and that the problems we were having weren't serious enough to justify calling off a wedding. I asked Nicholas what his friends thought about his text messages to Vincent and his refusal to apologize. Nicholas said he had explained the situation and that his friends understood he had been trying to be considerate of Vincent's financial situation. He said they thought I was overreacting to what was essentially a misunderstanding. This conversation helped me realize that Nicholas and I had completely different perspectives on what had happened. From his point of view, he had made a reasonable attempt to help with a financial problem and I was punishing him for good intentions. From my perspective, he had made assumptions about my family, gone behind my back to uninvite my uncle from our wedding, and then refused to take responsibility for his actions. The conversation ended with Nicholas saying he thought I would eventually realize I had made a mistake, but that by then it would be too late to fix things. He said he wasn't going to wait around for me to change my mind. Last Tuesday, Nicholas came by our apartment to pick up the rest of his belongings. The process was awkward but civil. Nicholas took most of his furniture and personal items. We divided up shared purchases like kitchen appliances and wedding gifts that had already arrived. Before he left, Nicholas made one more attempt to change my mind. He said that we had built a life together over 3 years and that it was wasteful to throw that away over problems that could be fixed with effort and time. I told Nicholas that I respected the time we had spent together, but that I had come to realize we wanted different things from a relationship. Nicholas asked what I meant by that, so I tried to explain as clearly as possible. I said that I needed to be with someone who could disagree with me without withdrawing emotionally. I needed someone who would respect my family relationships instead of trying to manage or control them. I needed someone who could take responsibility for their mistakes instead of always finding ways that problems were someone else's fault. Nicholas listened to this explanation and then said that I was describing an idealized version of relationships that didn't exist in real life. He said that all couples have power struggles and that the key is learning to compromise. He accused me of having unrealistic expectations that would make it impossible for me to be happy with anyone. After Nicholas left with his belongings, I spent the evening cleaning the apartment and rearranging furniture. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely relaxed. I didn't have to worry about managing anyone's reactions or walking on eggshells. I could just exist in my own space without tension. I called Vincent that evening to update him on everything that had happened. He listened to my description of the conversation with Nicholas and then asked how I was feeling about everything. I told Vincent that I felt relieved but also a little sad about the end of the relationship. Vincent said that was normal and that it was possible to grieve the end of something even when you knew it was the right decision. Vincent also told me something that I found helpful. He said that the most important thing I had learned from this experience was that I could trust my own judgment about what I needed from a relationship. He said that many people ignore their instincts about compatibility and end up in marriages that make them unhappy. Over the past week, I've been adjusting to living alone again. The apartment feels different without Nicholas's presence, but not in a bad way. I've been sleeping better and feeling less anxious in general. A few mutual friends have reached out to ask about what happened. I've kept my explanations brief and neutral. I've said that Nicholas and I realized we weren't compatible for marriage and that we decided to end things before the wedding rather than after. One friend, Jessica, pushed for more details because she said she was surprised by the breakup. When I gave her a general overview of the situation with Vincent and the text messages, Jessica seemed to understand why I had concerns about Nicholas's behavior. Jessica also mentioned that she had always felt like I seemed tense when I was around Nicholas, though she hadn't said anything at the time. She said I seemed more like myself again now, which was reassuring to hear. Yesterday, I got an unexpected text message from Nicholas. He said he had been thinking about our last conversation and that he wanted to apologize for some of the things he had said. He also said he hoped we could remain friends eventually, though he understood that I might need time before that was possible. I appreciated the message, but I didn't respond to it. I think Nicholas and I need significant time apart before we can determine if any kind of friendship is possible. Right now, I'm focused on moving forward with my life rather than looking backward at what didn't work. The wedding date that we had originally planned is next weekend. Instead of being in the middle of final preparations and rehearsal dinners, I'm planning to spend the weekend helping Vincent with some projects around his apartment. It feels like a much better way to spend the time. Update 3: I wanted to provide a final update on how things have been going since I called off my wedding. It's been about 2 months since everything happened and I feel like I can now see the situation more clearly. The weekend that was supposed to be my wedding turned out to be exactly what I needed. I drove up to Vincent's place on Friday afternoon and we spent the entire weekend working on a project he had been putting off for months, organizing and digitizing old family photos that had been stored in boxes in his closet. We found pictures I hadn't seen in years. Photos of my parents from before I was born, pictures of me as a child that Vincent had taken during school events and family outings, and even some old photos of Vincent's parents and grandparents that I had never seen before. We spent hours going through everything, scanning the important ones, and creating organized albums. During that weekend, Vincent told me more stories about my parents and about his own childhood than he had shared in years. There was something about the quiet work of sorting through memories that made conversation flow naturally. I learned things about my family history that I had never known before. Vincent also talked more openly about how he had felt when Nicholas contacted him about the wedding. He said that beyond being hurt by the assumption about his finances, he had been concerned about what it suggested about how Nicholas viewed our family. Vincent said he had worried that Nicholas saw him as an embarrassment or burden that needed to be managed. I realized during the conversation that Vincent had been protecting my feelings by not expressing his full reaction to Nicholas's behavior. He had been diplomatic in our previous conversations because he didn't want to influence my decision about the wedding. But once I had made my choice, he felt comfortable being more honest about his concerns. Vincent also told me that he had been prepared to step back from my life if that's what it took for my marriage to work. He said he would have been heartbroken, but that he loved me enough to remove himself as a source of conflict if necessary. This revelation made me understand even more clearly that I had made the right decision. The following week back in Philadelphia was when things got more complicated. Nicholas had been sending me occasional text messages since our last conversation, usually just checking in or sharing something he thought I would find interesting. I had been responding politely but briefly. On Wednesday evening, Nicholas called and asked if we could meet for coffee to talk about some practical matters. He said he had some mail that had been delivered to his friend's apartment for me, and that there were a few shared accounts that we needed to close or transfer. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my apartment. When I arrived, Nicholas was already there with a folder of papers and a small stack of mail. We handled the practical business quickly, closing a joint credit card account, transferring utilities, and discussing what to do about the lease on my apartment that both of our names were on. After we finished with the paperwork, Nicholas asked how I was doing. I told him I was adjusting well to the changes and that I felt good about my decision. Nicholas nodded and said he was glad I seemed happy. Then Nicholas said he had been doing some thinking about our relationship and that he wanted to share some insights he had gained. He said he had realized that he sometimes had trouble expressing his emotions directly and that this had led to communication problems between us. Nicholas also said he had been talking to a counselor individually and that he was working on being more aware of his patterns in relationships. He said he understood now that his tendency to withdraw during conflicts had been harmful to our relationship. I appreciated that Nicholas was working on understanding himself better, but I also felt cautious about where the conversation was heading. When I didn't respond immediately, Nicholas continued. He said that he believed we had both made mistakes in our relationship, but that the problems weren't insurmountable. Nicholas said he thought we could have a healthier relationship now that he was more aware of his communication patterns and now that I had been more direct about my needs. Nicholas then asked if I would be willing to consider starting over slowly, maybe as friends first, with the possibility of rebuilding something romantic if we both felt ready for that eventually. I thought carefully before responding because I wanted to be honest but not unnecessarily hurtful. I told Nicholas that I was glad he was working on understanding himself better and that I hoped those insights would help him in future relationships. But I said that I didn't think trying again was the right choice for me. I explained that even if Nicholas changed his communication patterns, I didn't think we were fundamentally compatible in terms of what we wanted from a partnership. I said that I needed to be with someone who naturally approached conflicts and family relationships in a way that felt comfortable to me, rather than someone who had to work against their instincts to accommodate my needs. Nicholas seemed disappointed but not entirely surprised by my response. He asked if there was anything he could have done differently that would have changed my mind. I told him honestly that I didn't think so, that I had come to realize we simply weren't right for each other, regardless of who was at fault for specific problems. Before we left the coffee shop, Nicholas said he hoped I would find what I was looking for in a relationship. He also said he was sorry about the way things had ended and that he wished he had handled the situation with Vincent differently from the beginning. I thanked Nicholas for the apology and told him I wished him well. We shook hands and agreed that it was probably best if we didn't maintain regular contact, at least for the immediate future. Walking home from that meeting, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't experienced before. Nicholas and I had been able to have a calm, respectful conversation about the end of our relationship. Even though we still had different perspectives on what had gone wrong, we had both acknowledged that ending the engagement was the right decision. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. I was sleeping better, eating better, and generally feeling more energetic than I had in months. I started taking a yoga class on Tuesday evenings and joined a book club that met monthly at a local bookstore. I also began spending more time with friends I had somewhat neglected during the intense period of wedding planning and relationship problems. Jessica and I started having regular dinner dates, and I reconnected with a college friend who lived in Philadelphia but whom I hadn't seen much since I started dating Nicholas. During one of these dinners with Jessica, she mentioned that she had always thought Nicholas was controlling, though she had never felt comfortable saying so while we were together. She said she had noticed that I seemed to check with Nicholas before expressing opinions about movies, restaurants, or weekend plans, even in casual social situations. Jessica's observation surprised me because I hadn't been conscious of doing that. But when I thought back to social gatherings, I realized she was right. I had developed a habit of gauging Nicholas's reaction before expressing preferences or disagreeing with something someone had said. This conversation helped me understand that the problems in my relationship with Nicholas had been more pervasive than I had realized. It wasn't just about the incident with Vincent or the silent treatment during arguments. I had been subtly modifying my behavior in many small ways to avoid conflict with Nicholas. About 3 weeks ago, I got a text message from Nicholas's mother. She said she had been thinking about me and wanted to know how I was doing. She also said that she and Nicholas's father had always enjoyed getting to know me and that they were sorry things hadn't worked out between Nicholas and me. I appreciated the message, but it also made me uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if Nicholas's mother was reaching out on her own or if Nicholas had asked her to contact me. I decided to respond politely but briefly, thanking her for thinking of me and wishing their family well. A few days later, Nicholas's mother sent another message asking if I would be interested in having lunch with her sometime. She said she understood if I preferred not to maintain contact with Nicholas's family, but that she had valued our relationship and hoped we could stay in touch. I thought about this invitation for several days before responding. On one hand, I had genuinely liked Nicholas's parents and appreciated their kindness to me during our relationship. On the other hand, I worried that maintaining contact with them might make it harder for both Nicholas and me to move on completely. I ultimately decided to decline the lunch invitation, but I did so in a way that left the door open for possible future contact. I told Nicholas's mother that I appreciated her reaching out and that I had always enjoyed spending time with her and Nicholas's father. But I said that I thought it was best for everyone if I didn't maintain close contact with Nicholas's family while we were all still adjusting to the end of the engagement. Nicholas's mother responded graciously, saying she understood my decision and that I should feel free to reach out if I ever changed my mind. Meanwhile, my relationship with Vincent has continued to grow stronger. We talk on the phone twice a week now instead of just on Sundays, and I've been visiting him more frequently. Last weekend, we drove to a nearby state park and went hiking together, something we hadn't done since I was in high school. Vincent has started dating someone, a woman named Carol who volunteers at the food bank with him. He mentioned her casually during one of our phone calls, and I could tell he was happy but trying not to make a big deal about it. I encouraged him to tell me more about her, and it was clear that he really enjoys her company. I met Carol last weekend when I was visiting Vincent. She's warm and funny, and she clearly cares about Vincent a lot. She asked thoughtful questions about my work and my life in Philadelphia, and she shared stories about her own grown children and grandchildren. Watching Vincent with Carol, I could see how relaxed and happy he was. This new development in Vincent's life has made me realize something important. For years, I had worried that Vincent was lonely and that I was his only close relationship. I had felt guilty about moving away for college and then work, and I had sometimes made decisions based on not wanting to leave Vincent alone. But seeing Vincent with Carol, and hearing about his friendships with other volunteers at the food bank, I understood that he had built a full and satisfying life for himself. My presence in his life was important to him, but he wasn't dependent on me for his happiness or social connection. This realization has freed me from a worry I didn't even know I was carrying. I had always assumed that any serious romantic relationship would require me to balance my partner's needs against Vincent's needs. But now I can see that the right partner would understand that Vincent is simply part of my life, not a competing priority. Yesterday, I had an interesting conversation with a coworker who was asking about my weekend plans. When I mentioned that I was driving up to visit Vincent, she made a comment about how nice it was that I was so close to my family. This casual comment made me realize that other people don't necessarily view my relationship with Vincent as unusual or excessive. During my relationship with Nicholas, I had started to see my closeness with Vincent through Nicholas's eyes, as something that needed to be managed or justified. But my coworker's reaction reminded me that most people understand that family relationships are important and that maintaining close ties with the people who raised you is normal and healthy. Looking back over the past few months, I can see that calling off my wedding was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Not just because I avoided marrying someone who wasn't right for me, but because the process taught me important things about what I need in a relationship. I learned that I need to be with someone who makes me feel more like myself, not less. I need someone who can handle disagreement without withdrawing emotionally. I need someone who respects my family relationships instead of viewing them as competition or obstacles. Most importantly, I learned that I can trust my own judgment about what feels right in a relationship. For months, I had been second-guessing my instincts and trying to convince myself that the problems with Nicholas were normal or fixable. But my gut feelings about our incompatibility turned out to be accurate. I'm not actively dating right now, and I'm not in any hurry to start. I'm enjoying living alone, spending time with friends and family, and focusing on work and hobbies that I'm interested in. When I'm ready to start dating again, I'll have a much clearer sense of what I'm looking for in a partner. The money I had saved for the wedding is still sitting in my savings account. I've been thinking about using some of it to take a vacation with Vincent and Carol, maybe somewhere none of us has been before. Vincent mentioned that Carol has always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon, and I think it would be fun to plan a trip together. It feels good to be making plans based on what I actually want to do, rather than what someone else expects from me. For the first time in years, I feel completely free to be myself. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My sister demanded I be her surrogate without asking, then filed a fake application in my name. 6 months later she's pregnant, but it's not what anyone expected. I never thought I'd be sharing this on Reddit, but I guess life has a way of surprising you. I'm Sarah, 28F, and my world turned upside down about 6 months ago. It all started when my sister Angelina, 32F, announced she was pregnant. To give you some background, Angelina and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, we were 4 years apart, which meant we were never really in the same stage of life at the same time. Angelina was always the perfect child, straight A's, captain of the debate team, first chair violin in the school orchestra. I, on the other hand, was more of a free spirit. I did well in school, but I was more interested in computers and coding than extracurricular activities. Our parents, especially our mom, always seemed to favor Angelina. They'd go to all her recitals and debates, but when it came to my coding competitions, they'd often be too busy to attend. It created a rift between us that only grew as we got older. When Angelina met Tom, 34M, in college, it seemed like her perfect life was complete. They got married right after graduation, and everyone expected them to start a family right away. But years passed, and no baby came. Angelina never really talked about it, but I could tell it was bothering her. Meanwhile, I focused on my career. I became a software developer, landed a great job at a tech startup, and bought my own apartment. I was happy with my life, even if it wasn't the traditional path my parents had envisioned for me. So when Angelina announced she was pregnant, I was genuinely happy for her. I thought maybe this would finally bring us closer as sisters. But then came the bombshell. Angelina told me I was going to be the surrogate mother. Not asked. Told. I was shocked. Angelina and I weren't close enough for her to assume I'd do something like this. We talked maybe once a month, usually just surface-level catch-ups. So for her to just assume I'd carry her baby? It was mind-boggling. When I tried to tell her I wasn't comfortable with the idea, she brushed it off. "Oh, come on, Sarah," she said. "It's not a big deal. You're not using your uterus right now anyway." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not using my uterus? Was she serious? I tried to explain that being a surrogate was a huge decision, one that would affect my body, my job, and my life for at least 9 months. But Angelina wouldn't listen. She kept going on about how she and Tom had been trying for so long, how this was their last chance, and how I was being selfish for not wanting to help. Things got even worse when our parents got involved. Mom, 56F, and Dad, 58M, sided with Angelina, as usual. They started calling me every day, telling me how important family is and how I should be willing to do anything for my sister. Dad even said, "Sarah, this is your chance to finally do something meaningful with your life." That hurt. I have a good job, my own place, and a life I'm proud of. But suddenly, because I wasn't willing to be an incubator for my sister, none of that mattered? It felt like I was back in high school, constantly being compared to Angelina and found wanting. The pressure kept mounting. Angelina started telling our extended family and friends about her wonderful sister who was going to be her surrogate. She even posted about it on Facebook before I had agreed to anything. Suddenly, I was getting messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all praising me for my selflessness. I tried to set the record straight, but Angelina had already spun her story. Anyone I told the truth to either didn't believe me or said I was being dramatic. "It's just 9 months, they'd say. Don't you want your sister to be happy?" But it wasn't just 9 months. It was my body, my career, my life. I had just been promoted to lead developer on a major project at work. How was I supposed to manage that while pregnant? And what about the health risks? The potential long-term effects on my body? Nobody seemed to care about any of that. The final straw came at a family dinner. Angelina had invited everyone over to celebrate the upcoming surrogacy. I hadn't agreed to anything, but she acted like it was a done deal. As we sat around the table, she started talking about her plans for the nursery and how excited she was for me to start the hormone treatments. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and told everyone the truth. I said I had never agreed to be a surrogate, that Angelina had been lying to everyone, and that I was tired of being pressured and guilted into something I didn't want to do. The room went quiet. Then all hell broke loose. Angelina burst into tears, saying I was ruining her only chance at motherhood. Mom and Dad started yelling at me, calling me selfish and heartless. Tom just sat there, looking uncomfortable. I left the dinner feeling like I was going crazy. Was I really the bad guy here? Was I being selfish for not wanting to give up my body and my life for 9 months? I didn't think so, but my family sure seemed to think otherwise. Since that night, things had been tense. Angelina isn't speaking to me. Mom and Dad keep leaving guilt-tripping voicemails. Even some of my friends have been weird about it, saying things like, "Well, if it was my sister, I'd do it." I'm standing my ground, but it's hard. I feel like I'm losing my family over this. But at the same time, I can't believe they'd put this kind of pressure on me. It's my body, my choice, right? The whole situation has brought up a lot of old feelings from childhood. The constant comparison to Angelina, the feeling that nothing I do is ever good enough for my parents. I thought I had moved past all that, but this surrogacy drama has brought it all back to the surface. I've tried talking to Angelina one-on-one, hoping to make her understand my perspective. But she won't listen. She keeps saying things like, "You've always been selfish and you've never cared about anyone but yourself." It's like she's rewriting our entire history to fit this narrative where I'm the bad guy. As for Tom, he's been strangely quiet throughout this whole ordeal. When I've tried to talk to him about it, he just says it's between Angelina and me. But shouldn't he have a say in who carries his child? His lack of involvement is making me suspicious, but I can't quite put my finger on why. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to cave just to make the drama stop, but I know that's not the right reason to become a surrogate. Another part of me wants to cut ties with all of them and start fresh somewhere else. I've been looking into transferring to my company's office in another city, just to get some distance from all this. But is running away really the answer? And what if Angelina tries to go through with this surrogacy plan with someone else? Should I warn them? I guess I'm writing this to see if I'm crazy. Am I wrong for not wanting to be my sister's surrogate? How do I handle this situation without losing my family entirely? Any advice would be appreciated because right now, I feel like I'm drowning in family drama with no way out. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my last post, and the situation has somehow managed to get even more complicated. First off, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and advice really helped me feel less crazy about the whole situation. I took your suggestions to heart and decided to stand my ground. I made it clear to my family that I wouldn't be a surrogate, no matter how much they pressured me. For a while, things were quiet. Too quiet, as it turns out. Last week, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was a woman claiming to be from a surrogacy agency. She started going on about how they'd received my application and were excited to move forward with the process. I was confused at first, then horrified as I realized what had happened. Angelina had filled out a surrogacy application in my name. She had used my personal information, forged my signature, and even sent in medical records she must have somehow obtained. I was livid. This wasn't just crossing a line, it was identity theft. I immediately called the agency back and explained the situation. They were understanding but advised me to file a police report to protect myself. I was torn. Filing a police report meant potentially getting Angelina into serious legal trouble. But at the same time, what she did was illegal and a massive violation of my privacy. I thought back to all the times in our childhood when Angelina had gotten away with things because I didn't want to get her in trouble. Like the time she broke Mom's favorite vase and blamed it on me, or when she borrowed my car in college and got into an accident. After a lot of thought, I decided to file the report. It wasn't an easy decision, but I felt I needed to protect myself. What if Angelina tried something like this again? The fallout was immediate and intense. Angelina called me screaming, saying I was trying to ruin her life. Mom and Dad were furious, telling me I was tearing the family apart. Even Tom, who had been mostly quiet throughout this whole ordeal, left me an angry voicemail. But here's where things get even more complicated. Remember how I mentioned that Angelina and Tom had been trying for a baby for years? Well, it turns out there's a reason for that. A mutual friend reached out to me after hearing about the police report. She told me something I never knew. Tom had a vasectomy years ago, before he even met Angelina. This revelation hit me hard. Not only because it meant Angelina had been lying about their fertility struggles, but because it brought back a memory from years ago. When Angelina and Tom first started dating, I remember overhearing a conversation between them at a family barbecue. Tom had said something about not wanting kids, and Angelina had agreed, saying she wasn't sure about motherhood either. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it seemed significant. Apparently, Tom never wanted children. He told Angelina this when they first started dating, and she said she was okay with it. But as the years went by, Angelina became obsessed with the idea of having a baby. She started pressuring Tom, who eventually agreed to look into adoption or surrogacy to make her happy. This new information made me question everything. Why was Angelina so desperate for a baby when she had initially been okay with not having kids? And why go to such extreme lengths to make me a surrogate instead of just adopting or finding a willing surrogate through proper channels? I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront Angelina, to expose all her lies. But another part of me felt sorry for her. Was she so desperate for a baby that she'd resort to all this deception? In the end, I decided to talk to Tom first. I met him for coffee and told him everything, about Angelina's lies, the surrogacy pressure, and what our mutual friend had told me. Tom was shocked. He admitted he'd gone along with Angelina's surrogacy plan because he thought it would make her happy, but he had no idea about the extent of her deception. As we talked, Tom opened up about his own struggles in the marriage. He confessed that he and Angelina had been having problems for years, largely stemming from their disagreement about having children. He said he'd considered leaving several times but always stayed because he loved Angelina and hoped she'd change her mind about wanting kids. Tom left our meeting looking shell-shocked. I felt bad for him, but I also felt relieved that the truth was finally coming out. I wondered if this would be the push he needed to finally stand up to Angelina and maybe even end their marriage. As for Angelina and my parents, I'm still not sure how to proceed. The police are investigating the identity theft, and I'm worried about what might happen to Angelina. Despite everything, she's still my sister. I keep thinking about our childhood, about the times when we actually got along. Like the summer we spent at our grandparents' farm, staying up late to watch meteor showers and catching fireflies in jars. It's hard to reconcile those memories with the person Angelina has become. Mom and Dad are still not speaking to me. They're convinced I'm making everything up to get out of being a surrogate. It hurts, but I'm trying to stay strong. I've started seeing a therapist to help me deal with all the stress and complicated emotions this situation has brought up. I'm seriously considering moving out of state for a while, just to get some distance from all this drama. My company has an office in another city, and I'm thinking about requesting a transfer. The idea of a fresh start is tempting, but I'm also worried about running away from my problems. So that's where things stand now. My family is in shambles, my sister might be facing legal trouble, and I'm contemplating starting over in a new city. It's not where I thought I'd be a month ago, but I guess that's life. I'll keep you all updated on what happens next. Thanks again for all your support. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw another curveball my way. First, let me catch you up on what's been happening. After the whole identity theft fiasco, Angelina was charged with fraud. It was a misdemeanor, but she ended up having to pay a fine and do community service. Tom filed for divorce, unable to get past Angelina's lies about wanting children and the whole surrogacy debacle. As for me, I did end up taking the transfer. I've been living in a new city for the past month, trying to rebuild my life away from all the family drama. It's been hard, but also refreshing. I've made some new friends, thrown myself into work, and even started seeing a therapist to deal with all the stress from the past few months. But here's where things take an unexpected turn. Last week, I got a call from my mom. Now, my parents haven't spoken to me since the police report, so I was surprised to hear from her. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. When I picked up, my mom was crying. Through her sobs, she managed to tell me that Angelina was pregnant. Naturally, I was confused. How could Angelina be pregnant when Tom had a vasectomy and they were getting divorced? Well, it turns out the baby isn't Tom's. It's not even Angelina's, biologically speaking. My mom finally admitted the truth. Angelina had been lying about everything from the very beginning. Angelina isn't infertile. She never has been. The whole trying for years story was a complete fabrication. The reason she was so desperate for me to be a surrogate wasn't that she couldn't have children, but because she didn't want to go through pregnancy herself. Apparently, Angelina has always been terrified of pregnancy and childbirth. This fear stems from a traumatic event in her teenage years that I never knew about. When Angelina was 16, she witnessed our cousin go through a difficult pregnancy and nearly died during childbirth. It left a deep impression on her, creating an intense fear of pregnancy. But Angelina also desperately wanted a baby, or at least, she thought she did. When Tom told her he didn't want kids, she saw it as the perfect opportunity. She could play the part of the desperate, infertile wife, and guilt someone else, me, into carrying a baby for her. But when her plan with me fell apart, she panicked. She started seeing this guy behind Tom's back, let's call him Mike. Mike got her pregnant, and now Angelina is faced with the very thing she was trying to avoid. I was speechless. All the drama, all the pain our family has gone through, was because Angelina was afraid of being pregnant? It seemed too ridiculous to be true. But as my mom kept talking, more truths came out. My parents admitted they had known about Angelina's fear of pregnancy for years. They went along with her surrogacy plan because they thought it would fix her fear. They never considered how it would affect me or that it was wrong to pressure someone into being a surrogate. I felt a mix of emotions, anger at the deception, relief that the truth was finally out, and a weird sense of vindication. All those months of being called selfish and heartless, and it turns out I was right all along. My mom spent a long time apologizing. She and my dad realized how badly they had messed up, how unfairly they had treated me. They asked if there was any way I could forgive them. I told her I needed time to process everything. The revelation that my entire family had been lying to me for months, if not years, was a lot to take in. I said I'd think about it and get back to her. As for Angelina, she's apparently a mess. The pregnancy she tried so hard to avoid is now a reality. Tom won't take her back, and Mike wants nothing to do with the baby. She's alone, scared, and finally facing the consequences of her actions. Part of me feels sorry for her. Another part is still angry at all the pain she caused. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to have a relationship with her again, but I'm trying to find it in my heart to at least hope she gets the help she needs. So that's where things stand now. My family's web of lies has finally unraveled, leaving us all to deal with the aftermath. I'm still processing everything and trying to figure out how to move forward. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I do know one thing, I'm glad I stood my ground. If there's one lesson I've learned from all of Update 2, continued, it's that you should always trust your instincts, even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong. The whole situation has made me reflect on our family dynamics. Growing up, Angelina was always the golden child, and I was the black sheep. Now, it seems like those roles have reversed. It's a strange feeling, and I'm not sure how to handle it. I've been talking to my therapist about all of this. She's helping me work through my feelings of betrayal and anger. It's a slow process, but I'm starting to see some progress. As for my job, the transfer has been a blessing in disguise. I'm working on an exciting new project that's keeping me busy and distracted from all the family drama. My new colleagues are great, and I'm slowly starting to feel like I belong here. I'm still not sure how to proceed with my family. Part of me wants to forgive them and try to rebuild our relationships. Another part of me is scared of getting hurt again. I keep thinking about all the times in the past when I've forgiven them, only for them to fall back into the same patterns. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I've told my parents I need space, and surprisingly, they're respecting that. Angelina has tried to reach out a few times, but I'm not ready to talk to her yet. I'll update again if anything major happens, but for now, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward with my life. Thanks again for all your support throughout this crazy journey. Update 3. It's been half a year since my last update, and I thought it was time to share where things stand now. A lot has changed, and while not everything is perfect, I feel like I'm finally in a good place. First, the big news, Angelina had her baby, a little girl, about 2 months ago. Despite her fears, the pregnancy and birth went smoothly. From what I've heard, she's adapting to motherhood better than anyone expected. It seems the reality of having a child has changed her perspective on a lot of things. I wasn't there for the birth, but my parents kept me updated. They sent me pictures of the baby, and I have to admit, she's adorable. It's strange to think I have a niece now, especially given everything that's happened. As for my relationship with my family, it's Complicated. After taking some time to process everything, I decided to give my parents a chance to make amends. We've had a lot of long, difficult conversations about trust, respect, and boundaries. They've apologized numerous times and seemed to genuinely understand how wrong their actions were. We're slowly rebuilding our relationship, but it's not the same as before. I'm more cautious now, more guarded. But I'm also proud of myself for setting clear boundaries and sticking to them. My parents know that if they ever try to manipulate or pressure me like that again, I won't hesitate to cut them off completely. My relationship with Angelina is still strained. I've seen her and the baby a couple of times, always with other family members present. It's awkward and tense, but we're civil. Angelina has apologized for her actions, but I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive her yet. The breach of trust was enormous, and it's going to take a long time to heal, if it ever does. Angelina is struggling as a single mother, but she's getting help from our parents and attending therapy to work through her fears and issues. She's even started a support group for women with tachophobia, fear of pregnancy and childbirth. It's good to see her taking steps to address her problems, even if it's too late to undo the damage she caused. On a personal note, I'm doing well. I've decided to stay in the new city. I've built a life here that I'm happy with. My job is going great, I've made some wonderful friends, and I've even started dating someone. It's early days, but it feels good to be moving forward. The whole surrogacy drama seems like a distant nightmare now. Looking back, I can hardly believe how crazy things got. But I'm grateful for the experience in a way. It taught me a lot about standing up for myself, about the importance of boundaries, and about not compromising my values, even when it's difficult. I've also learned a lot about forgiveness, both giving it and receiving it. It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's possible. I'm still working on forgiving Angelina, but I've found that holding on to anger only hurts me in the long run. My therapist has been instrumental in helping me work through all of this. We've been exploring my childhood experiences and how they've shaped my relationships with my family. It's been eye-opening to realize how many of our current issues stem from long-established patterns. One of the biggest challenges has been learning to see my parents and Angelina as flawed human beings, rather than the larger-than-life figures they were in my childhood. It's a process, but I'm getting there. I've also been working on building a support system outside of my family. My new friends here have been incredible, offering support and understanding without judgment. It's made me realize how much I was missing by always putting my family first. So that's where things stand now. My family is slowly healing, though we'll never be the same as we were before. I'm building a life I love, on my own terms. And most importantly, I'm at peace with my decisions. To anyone out there facing a similar situation, stand your ground. Trust your instincts. Don't let anyone pressure you into something you're not comfortable with, even if they're family. Your body, your choice. Always. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped me more than you know. I'm not sure if I'll update again, but I wanted to let you all know that I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I'm thriving.